Dyatlov Pass, Yuba County Five, and the Khamar Daban Incident. Each of these harrowing stories details a group of individuals traveling through the Arctic conditions only to disappear, leaving few clues in a bewildering story. Today's case is no different, so let's discuss the Chivruay Pass Incident. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to another episode of Red Web, the podcast all about unsolved true crime, internet mysteries, supernatural phenomenon, and a lot of Russian disappearances. I'm your resident mystery enthusiast, Trevor Collins. Joining me hearing this case for the very first time, Alfredo Diaz.
Wow, what a coincidence. I literally just told you guys that I watched a found footage horror movie that was based around the mystery of Dyatlov Pass.
Dude,
called Devil's Pass.
He still has the psychic ability, even when we're independent. I don't know where these powers come from. This is your X gene.
It might be. I mean, the ability to just slightly know stuff without consciously knowing it.
Right.
But yeah, big word there. Independent.
Independent.
Look, I know we went from a nice big facility, sub-level 50. We're in a cabin now.
We're in a cabin.
Okay.
We got to dig a new floor.
I have no idea what I was going to say there. I got no clue whatsoever. It's a cabin, one big studio cabin. Okay.
Right. But if you lift up the bear pelt on the floor, I've started digging.
Trevor started digging. We've made a dent. That's about it. But if you know us, these walls ain't gonna stay up for long. We're gonna rip them down, we're gonna extend it, and then we're gonna put it back up.
Absolutely. So if you're looking to support the show, it is the best way to keep us going. So thank you in advance. You can do that by going to patreon.com/redweb. We got a whole slew of things offered to you there. Deleted content from this podcast, some of the goofs and gags that don't make it in. We have our movie club continuing on,
yes,
a new life, and a few other odds and ends there. So go check it out. Again, thank you so much in advance, Task Force. Your support enables us to stay indie and continue going into the future, talking about a whole swath. That's a good word. Swath.
Yeah, whole swath
of mysteries.
Look, the different tiers, depending on what you pledge,
right,
is Patreon, that will give you different levels of access to
clearance.
Said cabin.
Right.
Okay.
Right now, it's going to be crowded in this cabin.
It's going to be crowded, and you think that it's just one big square room. What do I have access to? Guess what? I'm sorry, like bottom tier, you get to look out into the cabin. Okay, you're outside. You can't step in yet. All right, you don't have access.
You're a task force member.
Yeah,
but you're not.
You're the outside.
Right.
In the second tier, you're in, but you can't look at the windows. No outside viewing.
You're right. You can't see each other, but you're there.
But you get a slew of goodies.
Right. And no one's ever seen a cabin that's 12,000 square feet, in one room.
Sounds unnecessary.
It's one room, no pillars to support the roof. It's precarious. We got to start digging fast.
No.
So become a task force member. Let's start digging together.
Yeah, all the tier 2 pledges. Put your hands up and hold the roof together.
right. The ceiling is also about 5.5 feet. So it's comfortable. All right. Well, let's dive in. A few notes at the top. Obviously, this is a little bit anecdotal, but we've covered now a few incidents, Dyatlov Pass and Khamar Daban specifically, in the Soviet era Russia, where people kind of disappear. And I don't want to pretend like it's some sort of big mystery that people keep disappearing in Russia. Of course, it is a huge country with a lot of remote and mountainous terrain. But Jillian, our field researcher, was curious about why there are so many that are similar. And so she was looking into it, and it seems that around the 1920s, hiking and camping was seen as a group bonding activity, and it became a popular sport across Russia. And so obviously, with more people going out into the wild, you're going to have some more incidents.
Yeah, numbers will spike.
Oh my gosh. And we're going to talk about the temperatures some of these places get, the height of their temperatures, and the depth, like how cold they get. It's
I'm talking like Fahrenheit,
wild.
though.
Oh, I'll make sure you can understand.
Okay,
I'll
perfect.
get you some Fahrenheit in there,
metric measurements.
a couple droplets of Celsius, just to put in that sippy cup of yours.
Okay, perfect.
Distill that down. But of course, there have been many hiking clubs and tourist guides for hiking in Russia. So again, a lot of similarities to Dyatlov Pass. We did a whole episode. I looked it up 3.5 years ago in the before times.
It's like my favorite episode was Dyatlov Pass.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, one of the cool things about the movie wasn't great, but one of the cool things about it was the fact that, like, you know, you get tidbits of the Dyatlov Pass, and we know it. You know, it wasn't like 9 bodies or whatever.
Yeah.
It was 9. Yeah. They went and like interviewed someone that was a part of the rescue team, and she was like, "Yeah, we found all 11 bodies." And they're like, "Well, there's 9." It was like, "No, there was 2."
She did something out there.
There's 2. They weren't on record. We saw the Russians like take. I was like, "Well, that's cool. That's obviously not a part of the mystery."
Right.
But my head's going like, "It's so cool because I love this mystery."
Right.
Not a good movie. I was going to repeat that.
Dang.
Repeat that. Not a good movie. Not a good movie.
We're gonna have to do it for Movie Club, though. You're gonna have to rewatch.
Oh
it.
yeah, just because like Task Force members are gonna be like, "Dyatlov Pass."
Right. So we'll maybe gang up on that movie a little bit.
Oh yeah, we'll rip it apart.
But when a rescue team says we found all 11 bodies, and you're like, wait a minute, your rescue team is a little small.
Yeah.
Where did those extra 2 bodies come from? Who's to say?
No. There was 9 bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
The rescue team found 11.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. As in like.
I thought the rescue team turned on themselves.
No.
Oh yeah. We'll just say they were with them.
As in like on record there was 9, and then she was like, "No, I was there. There was 11 bodies. They just reported 9."
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, "Oh, that's cool."
Interesting.
For context, we're recording episode 187 today. Dyatlov Pass was episode 10.
Oh my.
What?
Yeah.
Damn,
season 1 was
season
chunky. It was a big season, but hey, welcome to season 2, the indie. The indie phoenix rising from our own ashes. God, that was a painful process too. Let's hope we never have to do that again. That's why phoenixes scream. Now, coming back to the Chivruay Pass incident specifically, it is very similar. We'll talk about all the details, but one thing that I think was very clear talking to Jillian is that most of the sources that we have here, and there are not many, are in Russian and have some translation challenges. At least one source, Rambler, states that only one article was written about the disappearances back in 1973, and so the information on this case, needless to say, is a little spotty. But with that, let me take you back in time to January 25th, 1973. A group of hikers set off into the mountains of the Kola Peninsula in the village of Vrevda. The Kola Peninsula, by the way, is the most northwest part of Russia, and it's almost entirely within the Arctic Circle. So we're way up there, very north, very chilly. And due to the Gulf Stream, temperatures vary more than you might expect for something so north, depending on the time of year. So it's possible that it can reach up into the high 80s in Fahrenheit.
Whoa, that's cozy.
It's cozy, humid, lots of mosquitoes. To my memory, I'm not a geologist.
Like in the Arctic?
Yeah, when it gets that balmy, I've seen like Siberian mosquitoes go ham.
Like in all the snow and stuff?
No, in the summer.
Oh, okay, it was like all melted down?
Yeah,
okay.
I feel like there's one guy who just has his own separate cabin where he keeps all the mosquitoes to release it. Because what do they do in the winter? Anyway.
Dude, I get eaten up by mosquitoes.
Yeah, so if we ever go, I'm going with you.
Yeah, come to me.
Now listen, in the winter, it can get down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
So it's got to stretch.
Okay. You know, maybe like a light jacket.
Oh my God. This is SF talking, you know. They're chilly in the summer. Now, if you prefer Celsius, I got you. That's about like the upper 20s, maybe pushing 30 degrees Celsius, all the way down to, fun fact, negative 40 Celsius. That's where Fahrenheit and Celsius meet one another.
Oh.
Yeah. Generally, though, it's pretty cold. Let's just like say it like it is. It does get warm, but on the whole, it's pretty chilly. And in January specifically, the time of this incident, the average daily temperature is about 14 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 10 Celsius.
It's just so cold, like you can close your eyes and sleep and then your eyelids will be frozen shut.
You could close your eyes and blink and they'd be frozen.
That's true.
That's what it feels like. That's when people go viral with tossing boiling water into the air and it turns into like vapor right away.
It does, yeah.
Gosh. Now, the group consisted of 10 students from Kuibyshev Aviation Institute. Now, that's often abbreviated as KUAI, so that's what we're going to refer to them in the future. And this is in what is now known as Samara, one of the largest cities in the country, located in the south near the border of Kazakhstan. So those students include, and forgive me for the pronunciation butchering, I will do my best here, but we have Mikhail Kuznetsov, Valentin Zemlyanov, Ilya Altshuller, Artyom Lekant, Sergei Gusev, Alexander Novosyolov, Yuri Ushkov, Lydia Martina, Yuri Krivov, and Anatoly Pirogov. So these students were celebrating the end of their semester with a group hike, And there were 2 leaders because initially they were supposed to be 2 separate groups. Though due to scheduling issues, things of that nature, some people dropping out, what have you, they decided to just combine the groups. But what's interesting is that this group also brought cameras with film photos and diaries along the way. So we have, at least these were found, some insight as to what might have happened over this trek, as opposed to Dyatlov, where it was just finding the scene and going, what happened
here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was that? I mean, the whole like Disney snow engine animation thing.
Absolutely.
So was it cracked that it was just an avalanche?
I think the most likely theory was kind of confirmed through the simulation, the snow simulation of Frozen 2.
Yeah.
In that, yes, it was, they basically reconstructed the conditions and found that it could have been like basically an avalanche that dispersed some of the bodies because, again, a very brief synopsis is that people were found in all over the place.
Yeah.
Some tongues missing, some were buried, some were up in trees, some were up the mountain a little bit near the tent, some were in various states of undress, as if they were running from something. But you can see how it's ripe for conspiracies and theories. And that's kind of the case with this one too. But yes, that was so wild to see a few years ago. Frozen 2 animators, like, I don't know who thought about that. They're like, listen, I finished rendering that ice castle she's got.
Yeah.
I got some time. I've heard about this Dyatlov Pass.
It's a cool mystery I want to check out.
Yeah, cracked by Disney. So according to Russian news source KP, the KUAI chose a very popular route at that time, which is good because it did help them get found eventually. They journeyed into the Lovozero tundra and went through the Elmorak Pass. The first night they set up camp at the border of the forest. On January 26, they passed Lake Sidozira, climbed the river of Chivruay, and stopped temporarily. Looking at the photos that they found on the bodies, photos taken from that night indicate that night came quickly and snow began to fall as they were eating dinner. I do have a few photos for you, Fredo, to take a look at. And by the way, we are indie. These photos are going right back in the video version of this podcast.
Hell yeah.
So if you were a YouTube listener of this podcast, you will now have some of those right there. But otherwise, of course, follow us on social media where we will continue to post. I think we're going to come up with a new theme, the corkboard. So season 1. So season 1. But yeah, so what you have in front of you is a photo of the last known photo of the group before they commenced their hike.
It looks cold as hell. There are 2 people, 1 person side profile in the background, 1 person front profile in the foreground. He's got his thermostat.
You mean thermos?
Thermos. Yep, he's got his thermos and poured himself a little cup.
That'd be great if he was holding a Nest thermostat.
Yeah, he was like, it is this cold.
But I believe that might be from that night, or at least obviously it's from the trek.
Yeah.
And then we have, of course,
That's
the
cool
map.
That we have that.
Yeah, I know, right? Gives a little bit more insight, but we also have the map of the area so you can kind of see where they were at, what the journey looked like, and how remote it was.
Jesus. Yeah. That's why you don't touch grass. Or snow now.
Right.
Just get lost.
Snow.
We did the episode of people missing in the woods and stuff, and
listen, you'll age a lot slower inside.
Look, when we've done so many mysteries of like these experienced hikers and they go missing. I ain't got no experience.
Right.
We're going to get lost so fast.
I got no business
Bro, I'll get lost at a Walmart, man. Like, there's no way a forest.
There's going to be a missing 312, which is all the times Fredo's gotten lost in a Walmart. Yeah. But I mean, there's a reason why missing 311 is such a phenomenon because there's obviously differences in cases and there's a lot of reasonable explanations that can be had, but it captures just the holistic look of people that go missing in national parks.
Yeah.
Let alone situations like this where it is harsh conditions with a lot of students. This is another one with students that might be a little less experienced. And there's only so much a guide can do when conditions set in and you are just far from a city.
Yep.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about those conditions here in just a second, but they pushed on, okay? So this is continuing on that same night. Snow fell during dinner, darkness came quickly. They continued to push on that night, and they climbed the plateau despite the dark, and it's unknown why. There's a few theories as to why. Maybe they were trying to reach the forest for cover, maybe they were trying to get to the next village, and the diaries left behind actually didn't mention any of these reasons. These are just theorized. But according to Dr. Vladimir Borzenkov, his recollection from the later search, quote, the group had covered about 16 to 18 kilometers or 10 to 11 miles that day with elevations of 700 meters, 2,300 feet, when they were caught by bad weather, end quote. So at some point, the group then decided, just like the Scooby and the gang, right, to split up. 5 stayed up on the plateau and the other 5 continued on ahead down into the valley of the Kitkoi River. It's assumed that half were going out to scout the area for the forest, perhaps the village again. Again, we just don't know why, but they did split up. And the others stayed behind waiting for their return. Now this is where the conditions are absolutely gobsmacking. There were high winds, which meteorologists reported to be as high as 5 meters per second. Let me help out all the lesser buff minds, okay? We got scientists and beakers slanging and banging away in the corner of this cabin. And they told me that's 112 miles per hour or 150 kilometers an hour.
Damn!
Blustery.
And that's chilly winds.
Of course, it's chilly. You're right.
Feel like daggers to the face.
I didn't even think about wind chill.
Oh my
Regardless of how cold it was.
God.
112 miles an hour. That feels like a low-key storm. Like what is a low-grade tornado, Christian?
That's a good question.
Man in the chair. He's plugged into the Matrix. He just kind of thinks like a mentat, and it all comes to him.
He said tornado. Twisters out this summer.
Dang. Just like
Still
Aliens.
covering movies.
Yes, they just put, are they going to shoot at the tornadoes? It's an act. Anyway.
On a F0 tornado, which is a gale tornado, wind speeds range from 40 to 72 miles per hour.
Okay, so they're getting cozy with God up on a plateau where the winds are blasting. I mean,
yeah, hell no.
Jeez.
I mean, and again, like,
not to be flippant about the scenario. I mean, that's
brutal.
That's brutal, honestly, to stay up there too.
And it's just so unpredictable, right? Like, growing up, you'd be like, what's the weather like today? And then the weatherman would be like, it's sunny. Then you go to school, light clothes, and just starts downpouring, and you curse the weatherman.
Right.
And it's just like, you get caught out, that's death.
100%. 100%. So, of course, the 5 stayed back up on the plateau. So, again, they're at altitude. And it became clear upon finding the scene that they were not able to pitch their tent given these winds. It's not a surprise, but instead of getting into the tent, they laid on top of it. Obviously, if you're ever out in a winter, in the mountains, what have you, the more off the ground you can sleep, the better. Because the closer to the ground, especially on the ground, it just sucks all the heat out of your body. But this was the best they could do, to lay on top of the tent.
Wouldn't the snow just pile up on you in the tent?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Damn.
They also, looking at the scene, seemed to maybe try to start a fire, but obviously that would be untenable given the winds. And the locals, they also said that the temperatures that day were as low as negative 30 degrees Celsius or minus 22 Fahrenheit. So winds like a tornado, temperatures way below freezing. However, I do think that this is important. Those are what the locals say. Official weather report from Murmansk reported the weather was nothing special that day. They disagreed with local reports according to KP Samara. So it is entirely possible that winds were not as dramatically fast as were reported, or that the temperatures were not as cold. Either way, I think you know where we're going with this, because there were no survivors. Just to jump to that.
I mean, yeah, already the conditions are brutal, and they've been hiking for 10 miles, you said, that day?
10 to 11 miles.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. And a lot of changing in altitude.
Yeah. I've ridden that in an electric vehicle and I'm tired.
Yeah.
So actually hiking that, you're exhausted and then you're getting caught out by that. Like, you're not ready.
Not at all.
Physically, mentally, everything. Yeah.
Not at all. So the bodies of these 5 unfortunate souls were laying on the tent when they were found by hikers from the Moscow Aviation Institute following a similar path on January 27th, the very next day. So again, January 26th, they continue to push on past dinner into the dark, and sometime that night, each of these poor hikers saw their demise.
So wait, there was a group the next day that followed the same path and couldn't find them?
Oh, and did find them. These 5 that were up on the plateau.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So they followed a very similar path, which took them right to those 5 on the tent. And they found them because someone's hand was sticking up out of the snow. To your point.
Oh my God, yeah, it piled on.
Yeah. And so someone was reaching up and their hand was visible. That's the only way they were able to tell. And the group reported the deaths immediately, of course, as soon as they reached the village of Kirovsk. the KUAI group was due to reach Kirovsk on January 31st, but notably, none of them made it home. That was basically kind of like Dyatlov. There was a, hey, be on the lookout. This group will be here X date. That's when you can expect them. And when you don't see them, that's kind of the red flag signal that there's something gone wrong. So yeah, this group found these bodies, reported it when they finished their trek. But of course, we have 5 other hikers to find. So this is when an emergency search needed to be kicked off. Though, unfortunately, and again, very eerily similar to Dyatlov, it was delayed due to the harsh weather conditions that caused the whole incident in the first place. So they weren't going to be able to look for the KUAI group until February 6th, an entire week after they were meant to have returned.
I mean, at that point, you're not, I mean, look, they probably passed, right? That's such harsh conditions for such a long amount of time. At that point, you're going to get lucky if you find the bodies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I guess you said this was like around February?
Yeah. So the hike began very late January, and now the search is at the beginning of February. Yeah.
I mean, the bodies will be frozen, preserved until like spring, summertime. So then maybe you go looking for the bodies at that point.
Yeah.
But that's so long.
Right. And things can change as ice melts. How does that change the scene that they're found in?
Yeah.
Etc. So this search party followed the group's hiking path, and they too found the 5 laid out on the flattened tent. All of the group members were frozen. One of the 5 froze, again, with his hands up. That's how he was found. But they assumed that he was probably trying to keep the tent from flying away in the wind. Maybe since they couldn't pitch the tent, he had his hands up to hold the tent aloft at least a little bit, maybe keep the snow off their bodies or their faces. Either way, their faces were unrecognizable. It was clear that they were the KUAI hikers, however, because the skis, their notebooks, were all labeled with the same school name. Reportedly, search team members claimed that they had a look of horror on their face. None of them had their eyes, and despite the cold, it appeared that they hadn't used their extra clothes or backpacks for warmth, nor did they get close together to share body warmth. And so that raises a lot of eyebrows, and that's kind of the fuel for the fire on this mystery, because otherwise, and we'll talk about the others being found here in a second, but otherwise it seems like a very mysterious situation to have walked in on, which is ripe for theorists to start wondering, well, what did they see that terrified them? Why were they not trying to
add clothes, stay together?
Exactly.
I mean, maybe it's just, I don't know. They was just so brutally cold. Maybe everything was wet. I don't know. Like, I've never really gone hiking in such cold conditions. I'm not quite sure how fabric will act. You know what I mean? But I'm assuming a lot of stuff is like weatherproof or like sealed pretty well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see why conspiracy theorists start to run rampant with that one.
Right. Yeah, it's
they're all like close enough together, right? It's not like
they were all on like the physical tent laid out. You know,
so it's not like they were sprawled at different corners.
Right.
Like Dyatlov.
Right. So, it maybe does raise some eyebrows, but you also have to remember, to your point, Fredo, they hiked for like 10 to 11 miles, up and down, through snow, harsh conditions, and so that alone would tire you out. But the way hypothermia works, to my understanding, is that it also is a level of exhaustion. It's been described as basically falling asleep in a sense. Your senses betray reality where you start to feel warm. You start to feel hot even. And I've even had that in a way less severe version of this. Like when I was skiing for the first time, I had like Under Armour on and shirt and sweater and jacket. So even then, like you're physically being active, and so your body does feel warm. And so it could just be at the end of this day, despite the conditions, they didn't really fully understand what they were feeling. They might have felt warm enough that they didn't pursue further layering, only to then succumb to the conditions in a very unfortunate and ironic way.
You know what? That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that, actually. That makes a lot of sense.
So later that month, almost a full month now, February 27th, though I do want to say some sources claim that it was just, quote, early March, 2 of the KUAI hikers were found 10 meters, 33 feet from each other down in the valley below the plateau, 2 kilometers or 1.25 miles from the source of the river, and about 300 meters or 984 feet from the tent and the group that they left behind. So now we have 2 more. So now we have a total of 7 out of 10 found.
They weren't too much further.
Yeah, 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
Really not all that far. Their watches were stopped at about 5 a.m. And this is presumed to be close to the time that they died, since the conditions being harsh enough to freeze the watch, probably of a similar caliber to
shut down,
incapacitate a person. Yeah. It's probably not a very specific, it could be a window of hours, right, around that time. But suffice to say, somewhere in that night is when they passed. Now, of course, the families were quickly informed that the group had succumbed to hypothermia, or basically the cold, right? It wasn't until April that the next 2 hikers were found in the descent into the valley, 3 kilometers or 1.8 miles from the tent. And finally, the last member, Ilya Altshuller, was found on June 1st. So now, as you said, kind of into the summer months or into the late spring, they're starting to finish finding the rest of the party. So Ilya was 400 meters or a quarter mile from the others in the valley and at a steep descent. So where he was found was kind of a steep incline, however you prefer to see it. He wasn't wearing any gloves, and his watch was stopped at 4:30 a.m. So the cause of death appeared to be obvious to many, but to others, including the family members of the deceased, many questions still surrounded this situation. The circumstances of their deaths seemed like that something else might have been at play. Why would they separate? Why would they go so far from one another? Why would they not huddle up? And compellingly, especially if this was only within a few days, why were their eyes missing, and why did they have a look of horror on their face?
The only thing that for me that stands out would be the eyes missing. I mean, look of horror is just because it's so damn cold and they're suffering to me. Why they split up, some people, different physical calibers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people are like, I can't go any further. Others are like, okay, we're going to scout ahead, like we were talking about earlier. Why weren't they huddled together? Hypothermia, the illusion of being super warm in that scenario, mind playing tricks on you and your body. The eyes missing, I don't know about that one.
Birds, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Soft tissues, even if they are frozen, tend to be one of the first things going.
Just came in and plucked the eyes.
And also, other wildlife during the winter either is hibernating or not super active, but birds could be. So that makes sense to me. I don't know if the first party saw that the eyes were missing because they just saw the hands out of the snow.
Yeah. It seems like it was the later part of the parties that had some eyes missing.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know I mentioned this later on in my notes here, but it's worth mentioning now even. The psychological effect of a human seeing another human deceased in the environment, especially with the eyes out, could impart, or maybe they project the fear that they have seeing the face. Like, there's no way you see a face in that condition and don't feel some sort of dread. And so that could color the way they found the scene. But either way, it opened the door for a lot of people to want to believe in something else rather than just the conditions. And that's kind of why we're talking about it. But I want to compare it a little bit, as we kind of have already with Dyatlov, because part of the reason this incident is considered a mystery is all because many Russians and online sleuths alike have compared the Chivruay Pass incident with the Dyatlov Pass students. Of course, we did a very light summary before. I encourage you to go check out that episode. It was wild and wonderful. As far as mysteries go, obviously very dark. But suffice to say, many students went out hiking with a guide. Something happened in the night where their tent was torn apart. Some people were missing clothes. Some people had gone down the hill. Some were up the hill. Some people in a tree. Some people down low. Missing tongues, missing eyes, looks of horror. A lot of similar threads.
Yeah.
And some of the theories that surround that case, until the Disney kind of theory helped close some doors, was that they saw something that night, whether it was supernatural, alien, or even there was theories around
the government
covering things up. They saw maybe weapons testing that they shouldn't have. I believe there was things like radiation, Christian.
Yeah, there were signs of radiation on articles of clothing from, I think, 2 of them or 3 of them.
Right, I forgot about that. Almost.
Yeah, they put that in the movie too.
Was it in the movie?
Yeah, but it was a bunker.
It was a bunker?
Yeah. The radiation was coming from a bunker.
Was it zombies? Was it zombies?
It's like a weird time thing that you don't.
Oh, weird.
Yeah,
Okay. So it's way out there.
Yeah, it goes way out there.
So that's kind of like a high level synopsis. But again, it is that mystery and the surrounding circumstances that kind of impressed upon this one. And so what does feel like a very straightforward case here with the Chivruay Pass Incident is opened up mostly because I think the Dyatlov Pass Incident. Many of these comparisons, by the way, are summarized and translated thanks to the dyatlovpass.com website. So thank you for that. That website has been collating a lot of that information consistently. But in both cases, of course, let's talk more specifically. The military assisted with the search. So some theorists kind of thought that maybe this is the government getting involved, not to help, but instead to maybe cover up their involvement in the deaths of these hikers. Further, the government files covering the Chivruay case are still unavailable to this day, or just simply missing. According to Russian news source RT, all documents on the case, at least from the region where the incident took place, have been lost or destroyed. It's possible they were destroyed due to how much time has passed, or if they thought the incident had been resolved, that they didn't need to keep them. But either way, RT could not gain access to any documents from the Russian Ministry of Defense, if they even existed. So it's all these gaps in people's searches that start to open the doors of what if?
Yeah, you start having missing files and files you can't get access to. You ask questions. Why?
Oh yeah, that's a recipe.
Is this a clean-cut case? Mother Nature took him out. What are you hiding?
Of course, another similarity, both groups had people deciding to split up at some point in their journey and decided to continue traveling despite the rough weather conditions that they were facing, with reasons that we still can't fully understand. That, of course, raises so many questions and so many desires to have answers that aren't simply hypothermia. In both cases, a person known to the group conducted a private investigation, which is interesting. So in the case of Chivruay, Viktor Voroshilov, the cousin of Anatoly Pirogov, visited the mountains in 2019. He planned to do an expedition into Chivruay for a Russian television show. However, 2 weeks before he was supposed to go, he was murdered and burned in his car by a person supposedly disappointed with a car that he had sold them. So again, just more fuel for the conspiracy fire. I think it's more just very unfortunate timing.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like, oh, that's just a real big coincidence.
Yeah.
But damn, does it make for a juicy conspiracy about the government, though?
Yeah. Or just this person. Like, what would they have found if they went out there? Would they have found answers? Whether government or some other kind of cover-up, I don't know. And I kind of already mentioned this, but to formalize it, in both cases, the victims were said to be wearing, quote, a mask of horror. This could again be that psychological interpretation of their faces based on the searchers' own feelings. In both cases, the deceased were missing their eyes, and again in Dyatlov, their tongue. I don't know about nose or ears or anything, but the soft tissues of the face for sure, right, Christian?
Yeah.
So whether or not there's an actual connection between Dyatlov and Chivruay, many conspiracy theories have arisen to explain what happened to the KUAI group as a result. Before we dive into these theories, that stands out to me. I do think that these are unfortunate cases where even if they were guided by experienced hikers, the conditions were just unpredictable and they were in terrible situations and they succumbed to the conditions. But one thing that did stand out talking about Dyatlov, and I'll be curious to see if or how this kind of phenomenon crops up in these theories, is that of infrasound. Because even if it was the blizzard conditions or an avalanche that resolves the mystery of Dyatlov, there was the discussion around infrasound, which is the way the winds could have been going through the mountains and trees created a sound below that of human hearing, below 20 hertz. And it's been, I don't know if it's pseudoscience, but it was discussed that can create a psychosomatic environment, or do you have symptoms of nausea, confusion, things of that nature that then add to an already precarious situation. But that's one thing I'd be remiss to not mention about Dyatlov before we go into these theories.
That's fresh in my mind because of the movie.
Oh, it's in the movie? He just did this little smirk. He did this little smirk and finger gun, and he said,
Hey, I knew that one. Pew, 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 pew.
Hey, you know what? Complimentary task force membership for you to the Patreon.
Yeah.
You get to come see that movie club. All right. Oh, excuse me. It's actually called infrasound. Christian actually just looked it up, and it's also kind of been disproven that it can be audible, but it can also be sub 20 hertz. It's kind of, again, it's in the territory of pseudoscience a little bit. So
yeah, it seems like it depends on the frequency of the infrasound as to whether or not it's audible.
Gotcha.
It seems like.
But it can create some psychoactive symptoms.
It can cause like hallucinations and other symptoms like that. I believe, and this is just me purely anecdotal, so I could be totally wrong, but I believe that some have said infrasound is a possible explanation for ghost sightings as well.
Yes, I've heard that, and like kind of electromagnetic, like old electronics and old wiring, which I do believe lightly comes into the theories here, but yeah. So talking about the first theory, it is possible that the strange decisions made by the KUAI group were the result of Arctic hysteria, it's called. It's odd that the group decided to continue hiking into the night. Of course, once snow fell, the winds picked up, darkness came, all that stuff, especially with such cold conditions. The group that stayed up behind on the plateau is even more confusing given the altitude. Going down.
Oh, yeah, you'd want to be further down.
Yeah, you'd be a little less shielded from the wind, and going downhill, even if you're exhausted, admittedly, they probably were, would be less of a trek because you're using a little bit more of the gravity, but who knows? They probably all had pushed themselves quite far at that time. But it asked the questions, why didn't they leave or attempt to preserve their heat? Why didn't they try to seek a little bit more shelter from the wind? This theory was presented by Vice President of the Astronomical and Geodetic Association of Russia, Sergei Smirnov. There are other names for it that come from indigenous peoples across the Arctic Circle, such as Meriachinya and Piblokta. Those are the names given to it by, again, indigenous peoples that live in that area. It is said that people with Arctic hysteria will be more reckless and not remember their potentially dangerous actions later if they survive. Smirnov wrote that it is, quote, similar to mountain sickness, end quote, but with added psychological effects. I assume, Christian, that that's kind of altitude sickness, just being at higher altitude with some exhaustion, less oxygen.
Air,
yeah, but just to be sure.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Just difficulty adjusting to the lower oxygen at high altitudes.
Gotcha.
And all symptoms stemming from that.
Okay. And according to Russian news source Vesti, locals in the area are often, quote, frightened, though the article implies that they are scared of the Yeti or something more paranormal. But that does open up, again, I keep saying open up doors. This cabin's filled with doors. That is open up doors to, again, their local beliefs that want to fill in the gaps with something a little more supernatural and less straightforward, which again just continues to fuel some of these conspiracies.
It's also worth noting that confusion and memory loss are symptoms of hypothermia. So they're tangentially related to some of the Arctic sickness, mountain sickness
100%.
ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt, whether it is specifically Arctic hysteria or something similar, that confusion befell this group and ultimately fed into their unfortunate cycle that fed in on itself until, unfortunately, they passed. Now, moving on to the next theory, similar to the Khamar Daban Incident, it has also been theorized by Leonid Fyodorov, an electrical engineer, that the locations of these incidents were along fault lines that intersect with the global magnetic lines of the Earth. He found that Dyatlov, Khamar Daban, and the Chivruay Pass are all located in these locations. As such, the magnetic anomalies related to these intersections may have affected the hikers' minds as well.
Oh,
We're talking ley lines, portals.
Yeah, that's what we're getting into now. It's a very interesting theory.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like the Bermuda Triangle type thing, right?
Yeah.
Just like this area where it's just really weird. Do I think that that's what happened here? No. But do I think that there might be some spots on the Earth that just are a little bit wonkier? I think so. If not with like pure gravity taking,
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Like, I just feel like, there could be some really weird, wonky areas.
100%. There's definitely
to make it super like theatrical hot spots.
Yeah.
Whether it's paranormal or scientific or whatnot, right? Just natural hot spots.
Yeah. I mean, it could be looking for evidence, but a lot of people have put these maps together where these ley lines cross and there's hauntings at these intersections and disappearances at others. And you can kind of want to throw that away and be like, pseudoscience. But I don't know, part of me is also open to that, to your point, which is like our brains are very electromagnetic. The way our neurons fire off with each other, or there are micro electrical signals that you can actually capture with technology and see the waves, the theta waves, alpha waves, beta waves, all these things that happen in our brain. And so who's to say that this giant magnetic structure of Earth can't in some areas interfere with that and either create illusions or I don't know. I don't know if it's fourth dimensional beings walking out from the crevices of space-time, but
top. But I feel like, it's just like, things might be a little bit off here. Gravity, like maybe things feel slightly heavier here just because the way gravity works on this part, because of the way the plates are and the way it's rotating on the axis of the Earth or whatever.
Yeah, or even just your compass doesn't know what to do. Your electronics freak out a little bit.
I'll bring it up again because it's terrifying.
Get in there.
Deep into the ocean. You don't know. I knew it. I was going to make his.
Do you got thalassophobia?
Major.
Deep down in there.
Hate it.
We'll get a subterranean level down in there. We'll get an aquatic base, Cthulhu search party.
Like 50,000 Patreon members. Is that enough to stick you in a submarine to go check out Titanic?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Sorry, Task Force 50,001. 50,001.
Yeah, 50,001.
Okay. Then we'll have enough.
50,000 Patreon members, take me on a rocket ship. Send me off anywhere.
All right, you'll be Christian James Cameron. You'll be the Tesla car that went to Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we'll invest. We got to get bases back everywhere. Season 2 base is going to be a little bit more robust.
Yeah.
But now, kind of coming back to that theory, scientist Valery Demin told Russian news source Rambler, quote, "A long stay here really has a negative impact on people. Some just have a headache, others lose consciousness, others hear chantings and someone's voices. And the reason is that there are so-called geopathogenic zones. According to the tectonic map, there are faults of the Earth's crust in the Sea-Dozer area, and there is an active release of radon. Here, the intensity, structure, and interrelation of the geophysical fields, primarily magnetic and gravitational fields, hence the change in the weight of man." Goodness, a lot of words there. But,
see what I'm saying?
I mean, if radon has some sort of impact on our thinking and on our brains in some way, then even just the crust going crack, release, and then your brain goes, I could see it. It all makes sense to my wee brain.
Dude, that's but the buff scientist, you know what I'm saying? The buff scientist in the corner of the cabin that with all the beakers and stuff like that. They're the ones going, this makes sense, this makes sense.
Just put down that one.
Okay, we trust you.
Put down those heavy beakers for a second. Let me know, because it makes sense, but I'm not sure I'm understanding.
It doesn't sound wrong.
It doesn't sound wrong. However, to button that up, we did get a memo just now coming across my desk from the buff scientist. There is very little scientific research or evidence of magnetic anomalies affecting humans specifically. So this could be related to Arctic hysteria as well, though. But all I know is if birds and bees can figure out how to fly to and fro, and penguins can navigate the ocean, and turtles know how to get home, there's got to be something with the magnetic field and the brain.
There's got to be something that
ours is just
allows them
atrophied.
It's just gone. We focused on other things.
Right. We stared at our phones and we know how to make rockets, and they know how to get home.
God, like, what if we just right now had the ability to just fast forward like 10,000 years? Is everyone like in a little floating bed like Wall-E?
Yes,
and with like
100%.
necks like just naturally pushed forward?
It's like Vault 31, except we're all that brain on a Roomba.
Yeah. It's a good show. Look, maybe we don't have a need for I guess he had a mechanical arms.
Yeah. One like measly little arm. Here's the thing. I just stumbled into my own little conspiracy theory that I'm going to air out just so it doesn't metastasize in my brain. What if, penguins, turtles, birds can all get home, and the reason we're so preoccupied with technology and rockets is because we are not of this planet. And we're actually trying to get to our home instinctually. We have an evolution drive to get back to Mars or something.
Something went horribly wrong because no one's remembered that for hundreds of years. You know what I mean? Like, it went sideways real bad. Like, I don't know what, Adam and Eve landed on the planet, got knocked the hell out, and didn't remember anything, and then we just kept repopulating, going, this is our home.
Yeah, I guess this is it. This is what I've always known.
That'd be a pretty cool movie, though. I like the idea.
Put that down. Red Web Films.
We're doing this. This is trademarked already.
Man, we need to get a production tier on Patreon. Like, this is purely to fund these wild films that we're coming up with. This leads us to the next theory, the big one, the kahuna of it all, the one we kind of already talked about. Many theories about the Chivruay Pass incident point to government conspiracy or cover-up. Family members of the victims told Rambler that they attempted to gain more information from the government/law enforcement, but were either brushed off or told to just stop asking. Many suggest some kind of government testing occurred in the mountains. There are so many remote areas, and there's so much, no matter what country you're looking at, secret government projects. So you can always be like, well, maybe they're just testing because it's remote and they didn't think people would be there. But we know that this path was pretty well traveled. Multiple groups, at least even in that time area, were walking that path. So yes, it's remote, but it's not as remote as the government would want for, in my opinion, testing.
Right. I feel like the government would be like, all right, let's not test on this very popular path, or at least shut the path down.
Yeah.
Like, that contradicts itself. And so, like, I don't know how. Like, do I rule out the government? No.
Mm-hmm.
Do I rule out that they had
never rule them out?
Yeah. Did I rule out that they had some kind of base that was like adjacent to this very popular hiking path? Yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and if any hikers come within 1,000 feet and that are not a task force member of our cabin,
they
don't disappear. I just don't know what happens.
You'll get got. You ever seen the movie The Predator? You know how many of those nets we have?
Oh my God,
a ton of those.
Right. So you'll need a password.
No spikes. No more lava. No pit holes. Nets.
Just nets.
Tons of nets. All right. Nets coming out of the dropping from branches, coming out of the ground.
Some of them come sideways.
Some of them come at you from the logs of the tree, sideways, like Trevor said. Okay. Yep. Hey, is that cute squirrel? Guess what? He's got a net too.
That's a great point. We have militarized squirrels. Okay, they're not even indigenous to the area that we will not declassify of our cabin.
We are independent and unhinged.
Just nets. If you sign up for the Patreon, we'll give you the coordinates to the net free. It's about a 3-foot wide path. But we got off the path here, but many people believe that the military was involved with the hasty search. And again, yes, it was delayed because of weather conditions, but conspiracy theorists say it was delayed because they needed to scrub the environment and hide whatever else might have been going on to continue cover up the so-called wrongdoing. Of course, we'll never know if that is actually the case. All we can do is say what is probable, what is likely. But Pirogov told RT that his cousin had brought a camera with him to Chivruay. Quote, but neither the camera nor the film was given to us. This is Trevor speaking. The family is the us. Coming back to the quote now, although some personal items were returned. End quote. So why wouldn't you give us the film? Why wouldn't you give us the camera? Maybe the diary. I don't know, Christian, was the diary handed over? And it's a tough question to figure out because there's not a lot of resources. But basically, like, you gave us some of their personal items. Why wouldn't we have what feels like it could be evidence?
But they found the camera, though.
But they found the camera, yeah. So we have some of the photos.
But they didn't give all the photos.
Yeah.
See, that's weird.
It is.
That's weird.
Catching some wafts of mystery here.
Why do you care about all these group photos and like selfies and all that kind of stuff? Why do you just give the damn camera over?
Yeah. And of course, unreliable narrator kind of mentality here. Like, is he fully telling the truth? He could be. Are they definitely withholding some films? They could be. We don't know. But it is definitely intriguing. Definitely.
Or even if you're just holding it for documentation and stuff, you just say that.
Yeah, but then it comes back
you
to...
You just have a copy then.
100%. And then it comes back to, though, RT tried to reach out to them, the Ministry of Defense in Russia, and say, do we have any documents on this case? They're either missing or destroyed or...
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, I can see how some eyebrows are being raised here. And to further this theory, Lydia Martina, the oldest and only woman of the group, and Ilya Altshuller, the last to be found, both worked in classified research, so some believe that they may have been involved with or in the KGB. That is an interesting piece there.
Oh,
Two of them worked in classified research.
Interesting.
So the KGB, just for full coverage here was the Soviet security agency, similar to the FBI or the CIA in the United States, that utilized unethical and zealous practices to achieve their goals. So, it wouldn't be against the grain for the KGB to disappear somebody, just like looking at the records here.
Damn, the whole group.
But the whole group, I don't know. I feel like we're reopening that door a little bit.
Yeah.
It's definitely some sinister vibes in here.
Man, just when you think it's kind of like, I'm like, all right, this is an interesting story, maybe less mystery in my head, a little more clear cut. The government portion steps in.
It definitely is stepping in and stepping up.
It's definitely okay, this is definitely weird.
Yeah.
But it's like the government's making it weird, man. I feel like this is pretty. If there was hey, it's nature. We didn't recover the camera. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But are these half access to things, half information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just makes it very. I mean, that's why we're talking about it now.
Yeah. Yeah. There was also a researcher, Vladimir Negev, who theorized that the KUAI group was exposed to radiation. So according to Vesti, he said, quote, "That's why they were buried in closed coffins. There were no eyeballs because the radiation simply burned them out," end quote. And
how bad does the radiation have to be?
That's pretty intense.
Yeah, that sounds very intense.
Very intense.
But then also just the eye. It's so intense that it affected just the eyeballs, not like the skin. There was no blemishes anywhere else. It seems interesting.
I mean, where this idea of radiation may have even come from is also hotly debated, though there are some theories that the group died as a result of some kind of government experiment, as well as aliens. They're always in the picture. But the idea of radiation suddenly being part of the picture, we don't, as far as I'm aware, Christian, we're not aware of any articles of clothing or any signs of radiation in the area.
That's true. And they did get the journals, and then some people got some stuff back. And so everything would have levels of radiation on it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, unexposed film could have been developed or exposed to radiation. So maybe again, I'm just going down this path here. If that had happened, they wouldn't want to relinquish the film because either A, they didn't take photos, or B, the photos were exposed to radiation. But again, there's no evidence really of radiation. It's just kind of a theory, and I think maybe based firmly on the Dyatlov Pass incident, which did have provable radioactive results. But again, that's why some believe that these documents are still classified, despite the cause of death being officially hypothermia, that there must be something else going on here. There's a local news source from Samara, the location of their university, that wrote, quote, "The Hydrometeorological Center of the Murmansk region officially answered there were no weather anomalies at that time," end quote. Meaning that they believe there should not have been any weather-related events for the hikers, though weather can rapidly change, to your point. But yeah, especially out where things are a little bit more remote. I don't know. Especially when the locals themselves are reporting differently.
Yeah.
So the main wrinkle in this theory is that there's no physical evidence of the government testing or conspiracy. But you can see why it's a popular one.
Man, yeah. There's enough there. I mean, I usually have a higher tolerance, and if there's enough, then I can see droves of people going, "Yep, there you go."
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
100%.
That explains it.
I definitely want to feel very pragmatic about this case and be like, definitely an unfortunate situation, hypothermia, weather conditions, etc. But I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say that.
Yeah, that last little bit.
It might. It's making me looking a little bit, but
it's like, what are you doing here, government? What you? Why can't I take a look at that?
Right.
I will say, adding a level of intrigue, the note about Martina having worked in classified research, according to Dyatlovpass.com, which is a site we referenced earlier. Martina was an engineer at the Ekran Research Institute, and looking into that, it's likely it is the Joint Stock Company Scientific Research Institute Ekran.
Mm-hmm.
And I see two different sources, so I don't know if they maybe changed what they focused on over the years, but one source says that they work on the development, production, testing, and repair of aviation equipment used by the Russian Ministry of Defense.
Okay.
And then another source says that they lead development on radio electronic and optical electronic protection gear for airplanes and helicopters.
Oh.
So I don't know if that either adds credit to or debunks the classified
It doesn't
nugget.
seem like anything worth like taking out a whole group of, people over.
No. But you know what it does make me think is that, let's just say a high profile, let's like bring it to our terms, just for colloquialism. Like, let's just say a group of Americans disappeared and there was a high profile, top secret clearance, FBI member or engineer or what have you, from Skunk Works or whatever. And they were part of this group. But like, by relinquishing this more information about the disappearance, maybe other information that's top secret got caught up in that. And so maybe the Ministry of Defense is over in Russia is kind of just going, you know what? Let's just be simple. Let's just tell them what happened, hypothermia, but let's not give out all this information because they do know some stuff. And so we're going to be extra protective, even if it's overly cautious. So maybe it's a conflation of, yeah, these two have some secret clearance over here. And otherwise, yes, this is a mundane, unfortunate disappearance. But then the two kind of got mixed in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, like there's some unforeseen conflicts because of their
or like an
workplace.
abundance of caution.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can see that.
I can see that for sure.
But the final theory is that it's very possible that this group simply made bad decisions. They were all young people between the ages of 17 and 26. Some of the younger hikers had never been on a hike at this level before. The more experienced leaders may have been overconfident or underprepared for the students that they were guiding, or possibly they wanted to impress the less experienced members with what they could do. The theory's out on that one. But they could have simply misjudged the weather, the speed of the nightfall, believing that the forest or the village may have been closer than it actually was. And so they pushed on further into the night when they really should have kind of maybe hunkered down as a group. The group may have also split up due to some kind of disagreement. Again, we may never really know, but it's also possible that someone got hurt or sick, hence why they stayed on the plateau. However, there is no evidence of injuries, but according to Rambler, the autopsies were never released to the public. So again, questions arise. The decision to split up, with some staying in the most likely the coldest place that they could be, is what really opened this case up initially to the conspiracy theories. Everything else was kind of just adding fuel to that fire. But again, instead of being conspiracy theory, Occam's razor says maybe that was just a mistake, a misguided decision.
Yeah. It could have been. But like, if they had experienced hikers, it seemed like they had at least a couple. You think they'd leave one with the group that stayed back, and that one experienced person would be like, hey, we need to get down.
Mm-hmm.
I can see there being an injury, or just physically everyone they just can't move.
Yeah. I think fatigue is that injury, so to speak.
Yeah,
I
agree.
I just genuinely think that moving through snow of that thickness against that wind, against that cold, it is just deeply exhausting, I imagine.
Yeah.
Another instance here is that the group members that left did not bring their skis along with them, which has been pointed out by many to be a mistake, but it's also possible that the snow might have been frozen enough to not need them. Basically, there's some people that go hiking out into the mountains and they have what are called, I think, seal skins, where they're like little hairs that you put on the bottom of your skis and the hair goes in one direction. And so as you're walking up the hill, the hairs kind of give you traction so you can walk up. And then when you're ready to kind of move downhill, you pull those skins off and you can slide down more easily.
Oh.
And so it could have been, and so it's being taken as a mistake that if these hikers are moving forward and they want to move forward efficiently, why wouldn't they keep the skis to go down into the valley rather than leave them behind and trek, which would be obviously a lot more exhausting. The KUAI group was very close and often spent weekends together. They all knew one another, and most of them had been on hiking trips before and were pretty much experienced, right? There were some novices, but many of them were very experienced. They had hiked together in the past, so I'm sure they had shared tactics for what to do when certain situations arose, etc. So it, is mysterious that the close-knit group that had some level of experience, although not all of them, might have done something reckless or been making mistakes. But we can just truly never really know what happened on that night in those circumstances, in those conditions. But unfortunately, we know how it ended. And that is the case of the Chivruay Pass Incident.
Nature's scary, man. It really is. I just can't imagine having to be in that situation and I truly subscribe to the fact that like I think they split up because one group is trying to like find some sort of relief or place, and then the other group, I think, you know, you're explaining the eyes being plucked out, maybe birds, all that kind of stuff. I think the hard part to explain kind of why they didn't move down, but I guess it's because they could be overly exhausted. They're just like way past their limit. I think they just got hit by really bad weather and they succumbed to that. And I think the government doing government-like things just made it very, very prime and ripe for conspiracy enthusiasts to go, whoa, hey,
yeah,
right there.
Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the TV. Oh, what was that?
Right there.
Yeah, they're already the target always, and so the minute they do something that feels a little cryptic or a little behind the scenes, immediately there's a theory. Immediately you're filling that gap with like, well, it could be this, could
and
be that.
People are looking for you when they don't do anything.
Right.
So,
right.
For sure. This was, I like this because it's very Dyatlov adjacent. Dyatlov is one of my favorite mysteries.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Yeah.
Same. Well, as we wind down, I want to give another shout out to our Patreon and our patrons. So if you want to support the show now that we're independent, please go to patreon.com/redweb. And another thing I wanted to say, we're recording a little bit ahead of time. So by the time you hear this, everything is launched, but we're a little bit in limbo as we're kind of currently developing everything. But normally I would shout out some of our patrons right now. So if you want to be kind of name dropped here at the end or have a chance to enter the name drop pool and everything, certain tiers have guaranteed name drops and certain tiers you have a random chance to be mentioned. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. But just a broad thank you as we kind of re-enter this new chapter in the show. We are so grateful to have you guys still listening and still be part of us. It was tough for a while to like see you guys be remorseful that the show is going away. Yeah. And we're so glad we can bring it back.
Yeah, a lot of you guys really reached out and were like, Red Web was amazing, or one that really hit me recently, it's like, oh, first Monday without a mystery. And I went, oh, my heart.
I know.
Oh. But I mean, like, you guys have been there for us, and we thank you. We thank you, whether it's just, you know, whether it's supporting us on Patreon, which is awesome because that's how we get to continue doing this, or even just like, hey, I can't right now, but I shared it, or I watch every single week. I know. Maybe you watch it, maybe listen a couple times to help pump them numbers up,
dude,
you know, something like that.
Every listen, every share, every review, it all means the world. So however you support us,
it helps.
It helps
a long way.
Because this is our jobs now. It's our jobs now, baby.
Yeah. So it's in your guys' hands.
It's in your hands. But thank you again. I don't know. I feel like I can't say thank you enough. So anyway, this being our second episode back, woo! We got some more bangers coming. So Fredo, I'll see you right back here next Monday for yet, and I love to say it, another mystery.
We're back!